Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. Today I'm going to be reviewing 4 GX promo cards that we're getting just in time for the Australian International Championships and for this new Team Up expansion. I didn't profile these in the main set review, but I thought they are all relevant and interesting cards worth reviewing, so I thought I'd do a quick little rundown today. Starting with Flareon GX, this is the obviously Fire-type Eeveelution. All of these Eevees, I should say to begin with, that we obviously have the Energy Evolution Eevee, making them, although they are Stage 1s, they're basically very easy to search out, and we can get them into play on turn 1, so technically if you're going second, you can attack with these from the very first turn, so really awesome. 210 hit point Pokemon. Weakness to Water isn't too bad right now. There are things like Sylveon, there's obviously Vaporeon, and there's things like Quagsire and Lapras and Wailord and stuff like that in the format, but those are all, lower tier archetypes. I wouldn't say they're top tier, so nothing that you're going to run into all that often for a weakness, which isn't too bad for you. And this Flareon GX has 3 attacks. The first is Heat Stage. For a Fire Energy, you do 30 damage and attach up to 3 Fire Energy from your hand to your Pokemon in any way that you like. This is a lot of early game energy acceleration. It's very flexible as well. You can go to yourself to power up your second and other attacks as well, and you can set up things on the bench. We of course have Fiery Flint from the Dragon Majesty set, so it's quite easy for us to get a large number of Fire Energies into our hand. There's a lot of fire support as well with things like Heat Factory Prism Star. Obviously we've seen Blacephalon do quite well. There's a handful of other basic GX Pokemon that we might want to be powering up here. Ho-Oh GX is obviously weak to Lightning, so that's probably our least favourite in this day and age, seeing as though Zapdos is being released in this set. The Reshiram can do a big Vermilion GX attack and continue to accelerate energies from hand, which is awesome. And Blacephalon, it is currently just using a Naganadel engine, but potentially you could have a thin Flareon GX line in there early to help out against maybe some tag teams if you need to get that early burst pressure going, and having the Naganadels more of a fallback and a thinner line. So if you want to go down like a 2-2 route of both Naga and Flareon, you could try something like that out. And then having the Fiery Flint means that you might even want to experiment with something like the Ninetales that we have from the new set as well, that discards 2 fire from your hand, and you get to do a Lysander effect on your opponent's board, which is, again, really good pressure, and just means that you can keep drawing throughout the game in a similar way to how Lycanroc functions. So I can imagine Flareon setting up all these sorts of attackers just on that first attack alone. I think that's the key selling point of Flareon. Its other 2 attacks are obviously great, but the reason why we'd want to put this into builds is because of that energy acceleration. I think possibly the most promising build would be alongside Magcargo GX and non-GX Magcargo. That deck has always been a little bit too slow, relying on getting too many Magcargos out in the early turns to get Lava Flow rolling. But having a Flareon GX for that early acceleration means that you need a lot less crushing charges in the early game, and you can rely on those more late game when you've already developed your board a little bit further. So I do feel like it can go quite smoothly in a Magcargo based build. That deck does have a decent amount of space, and the synergy is here with the Flareon. It's very, very strong. Its second attack, Bright Flame, does 190 for 2 fire and a colorless. It does 190, and you discard 2 fire energy from this Pokemon. So again, this could be the guy that sat in the front in a Magcargo GX build, so that if your GXs are getting knocked out, at least you keep the crushing charge safe on your bench. So I can definitely see it being the sort of new face of a Magcargo build, and it's definitely worth revisiting that. That's the main reason I gave this deck the 3-star. I think that's the most promising deck that I can see coming out of it, and it really does buff the Magcargo deck. It was always like kind of on the rogue side of things, kind of a little bit too slow, relied on dumbbells to stay out of range. Obviously the Flareon can also benefit from dumbbells, so there's a lot of synergy here, which is awesome. And that 190 is a really good base output. You can obviously slap Choice Band on top to knock out Stage 1 GX Pokemon quite easily. And the discard of 2 fire isn't quite as painful as something like Lava Flow would be, so it seems like really good synergy for the Magcargo deck, to be honest. And then Power Burn GX does 20 times the amount of fire energy in your discard pile for just 1 fire. Similar to how Magcargo uses the Victini Prism Star to be sort of a late game sweeper when there's a bunch of energies in the discard, we can use it all over again with our Flareon GX. Obviously the Burning Magma GX attack doesn't have good synergy with an aggressive Magcargo build, so it's screaming out for a GX attack, and this one fits right in. So I can definitely foresee Flareon Magcargo being a big deck, and I think it can be really strong, to be honest. Having that energy acceleration early really does help you supplement it with crushing charges later on in the game, and it also means that you can keep your smooth overs and crushing charges on the board a lot more effectively. So it all points towards the deck getting a huge buff. It was definitely like rogue tier until this new promo came out, but it's a big deal for the card, to be honest, and I definitely want to start testing out this Flareon. Onto the Vaporeon. This one has the Vapor Drops ability. Once during a turn, you may heal 30 from one of your active water Pokemon. That alone might be the reason why we start seeing Vaporeon GX play. We've seen how Venusaur likes to play a bunch of Shaymins on its bench, the Celebi Venusaur GX, just to heal them in between turns. Or not between turns, but every turn you can get those procs. We already have Blessings of the Deep on Manaphy that could work alongside something like Magikarp Warlord, but instead we could be healing, 120 a turn if we have 4 Vaporeons out and we're just healing one big Warlord and keep stacking it up with energy cards. That could be pretty hilarious. Additionally, having that heal in something like a Glaceon deck I think has huge promise. I can definitely see Glaceon being pushed quite a lot. You can evolve both from your Eevees and just have one Vaporeon as sort of like a tech card that can then offer up Hydro Pump as a great attack. Seeing as though for 3 colors you do 40 and 30 more for each water energy attached to this Pokemon. Reads very similar to Quagsire's Hydro Pump attack, but our multiply is times 30 instead of 20 more for each energy, which is absolutely brilliant. We rack up into those big one-shots way faster than the Quagsire would do. So again, this may end up just seeing play in the sort of Quagsire builds. I know that there's been a couple of Japanese tournaments where there's been a Glaceon, Vaporeon, Quagsire, Naganadel, all 4 of them into one deck with like a 2-2 split of your Eeveelutions and then the 2-2 like Naga and Quag. Or we could just see no Glaceon, a more aggressive route with a Quagsire build. I think this is, again, more aggressive than something like a Lapras would do. The Vapor Drops is a really nice ability to have on top of that to help your tankability. And you also have the Healing Shower GX attack that for 1 water heals all damage from each of your water Pokemon in play. This can be really good against spread matchups, and Quagsire currently has no real answer to spread outside of playing something like Lana and Palpad, which are kind of clunky cards. Here we could add a new attacker to the deck, whilst also improving our matchup against spread. So the Vaporeon really does have a good amount of options. I think it hits way harder than it looks, because it's so easy to accelerate energies when we have Aqua Patch in the format, and Naganadel and Quagsire. This whole combination just means the deck can swarm energies really easily, and it doesn't take much for Hydro Pump to be getting 1-hit KOs. With just the 3 requisite, we're doing 130, and we can keep going on that really easily. So that's just going to be really good power and damage output. Obviously, you can slap Choice Band on top as well, so it's really going to rack up pretty high and get some really good damage in there. So I think the deck is definitely potentially a threat, and that's where I foresee it being in most. Combination of a Glaceon and Vaporeon, just because getting those heals in, especially against Glaceon, a lot of people try and use Tapu Lele just to energy drive when they have not much else going on in their board. For example, Zoroark decks, even if they have no trades online, if they can just run into DCE, they can just start hitting your Glaceon that's trying to Frost Bullet around the board slowly, and they can try and two-shot your Glaceon with energy drive. So now you have Vapor Drops to put yourself out of that range here and there, and every turn that your opponent misses attacks, you can get those extra heals in as well. So it seems like really good synergy for the Glaceon deck as well. So I can foresee the Vaporeon going into a bunch of those, which currently, again, they're not high-tier archetypes, but the deck is definitely pushed in a good direction thanks to these inclusions. Jolteon GX is probably the most promising of the lot. It has 200 hit points on a stage 1, obviously lightning type. Has free retreat, which unlike the other two is just incredible, having that free bonus. It is weak to fighting, of course, which is sort of means you have to be careful about when you can put this into play. Fortunately, from the Team Up expansion, we gained Zapdos, which is naturally a great card against fighting decks, so you can sort of cover your own weakness by having just a few Zapdos in your deck anyway. And again, I foresee the Jolteon being something like a 2-2 line in one of those Zapdos-based decks. It offers a lot more aggression early as well. Electric Bullet does 30 and 30 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. That's not really the end of the story because we have Electro Powers and Choice Bands, especially the case because Zapdos decks are often playing Volkner. So if you were to lead Eevee, you could simply Volkner for Electro Power Lightning, and then you could Energy Evolution into a Jolteon GX and do a 60-30. And how often have we seen Buzzwolls do very, very well because they're able to find their Beast Energy early to hit that exact number, 60-30. They even play Lucia these days to go grab themselves that Beast Energy and the Diancie to do that early pressure. And Jolteon can pretty much do the same thing with Volkner scouting out Electro Powers, which is really awesome. Head Vault for just a lightning colorless does 110, which is pretty efficient when you think about Choice Band and Electro Power. You just need one to be knocking out Tapu Lele, for example, with Choice Band on top, which is, again, just really good pressure for 2 attachments. That's where it differs from Buzzwole. Buzzwole is essentially jet punching until it can grab B-strings. Here, the Jolteon can go, the effective jet punch into one-hit knockouts from turn 2. So it's a really big threat on the board straight away as soon as you use Energy Evolution on that first turn. And you even have the Speedrun GX attack for, again, that lightning colorless, very cheap cost. You're doing 110 and preventing all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. So you get to keep your threat on the board, whilst, again, doing really good output when we have these buffs from Electro Powers and Choice Bands. I think this is a very, very strong card. It will go into Zapdos. There's going to be, as I profiled Zapdos yesterday. If you haven't seen the video, you can go ahead and do it. But essentially, I was saying Zapdos is going to be a top tier contender. It's going to come in many forms, and one of those popular forms will be alongside something like a 2-2 Jolteon GX, because you have great finishing potential with the Jolteon, and you have great spread as well. The spreads can put the Zapdos into range of knockouts, and it can do all sorts of other things for you as well. Adds a nice GX attack to the deck that it's kind of lacking outside of Tapu Koko, which is sort of situational. So the Jolteon GX really does fit into a Zapdos deck quite neatly as well. The other place I can see this is alongside something like Decidueye Ninetales, because we have that really good 30-30. You could try and build a bigger board and have Decidueye for additional Feather Arrows. You have Ninetales, which can also do Snowy Winds if you want to. Mysterious Guidance can not only help grab rare candies and Decidueye pieces, it can also help pull out Electro Powers for early electric bullet damage as well. So I foresee that to be pretty potent as well. Previously, the Eeveelutions haven't gone too well with Decidueye. It's only ever seen like rogue play. I remember when Glaceon first came out, it was experimented with Decidueye. I know Espeon's been experimented with Decidueye. There's been all sorts of the Eevees trying to go alongside this guy. The Jolteon seems to be the most promising because it naturally has good bench spread, and the Speedrun GX attack can just buy you time and keep an attacker on the board for an extra turn. And that's kind of a big disadvantage of Decidueye-based builds. Even things like the Zoro Decidueye, if your opponent just knocks out one of your Zoros, you only really have like one Zoro left on your board, and that's the thing you have to attack with. The Jolteon, using Speedrun, protects itself for another turn, so your opponent has to gust around and deal with like a Rowlet or something else. So that sounds really good for you. I can foresee a sort of spread deck being born out of that if you can find the space for Electro Powers as well as like rare candies and all that stuff. It'll be tight, but it'll be an interesting one to see try and work. Finally, we have an Eevee GX card. This is pretty interesting as well. It's a 160 hit point basic GX that we can evolve, which is awesome. It has the ability Reviving DNA. Once during a turn, if you have a card that evolves from Eevee in your hand, you may play it on top of this Pokemon to evolve it, excluding your first turn or the turn this came into play. So it's like a normal evolution rule, but via this ability. If you do, heal all damage from this Pokemon. So essentially that's the trick, really. Rather than just doing a normal evolution, you get to heal first. So, to be honest, I think this doesn't go into most evolution decks because Energy Evolution is so strong, and a lot of the Eevees have one energy attacks. Espeon does the Confusion, Jolteon obviously, Flareon. These are the big selling points for these attackers. Their first energy attacks are just really good value. I think things like the Vaporeon and the Glaceon are the only exceptions to that rule, where you don't do anything when you Energy Evolution up other than just get them into play. Obviously for Glaceon you want to get the ability, shutting people down, but for Vaporeon exactly, you're pretty much never using its GX attack as soon as you put it into play, and it may be best for you to wait as an Eevee GX, because you could get the use out of Happy Maker GX instead, which allows you to search your discard pile for 3 cards, show them to your opponent, and put them into your hand. This is the same as Hollow Hunt GX, but it's on a basic, and it's a colorless attack cost. Very, very versatile. I think if we're looking at a Vaporeon deck, like a quad Vaporeon, this is kind of what I'm thinking, and we try and go turbo with, Acrobikes and all that stuff, get rolling, try and get into lots of Aqua Patch, and we can start going for the Happy Maker at the end of your turn, to grab back more Aqua Patches and more Acrobikes and stuff like that, to continue that cycle on the next turn, and then you can simply use Reviving DNA to get yourself into your Vaporeon on turn 2 and start swinging with its Hydro Pump, whilst also healing 160, because that's a pretty good amount of hit points to have in the early turns. Obviously, its weakness to fighting is a big problem, and if Buzzwole remains popular, if Baby Buzzwole remains popular, this becomes, a concern. but potentially a Vaporeon deck could play like 1 or 2 copies of the GX and 2 copies of Energy Evolution instead, to sort of get around this and not be super weak. But I think this Reviving DNA ability is actually really strong, and it can like undo 1 turn of damage that you take, and that can be really good for a Vaporeon deck, which is pretty much doing nothing on turn 1 or 2 if you just Energy Evolution pass. Now we can get use out of Happy Maker GX, especially because Vaporeon doesn't have a useful GX attack anyway in a lot of situations, unless it's against spread. We can definitely make use of Happy Maker and get some tech cards back, or get some Aqua Patches rolling, which is really cool. I think if we're also just thinking about this in more broad spectrums, the Eevee could be really annoying in a few other decks. Again, going back to that like Whale Lord deck, and you have the Vaporeons in the background just for healing. You could play this Eevee GX and have this Happy Maker GX attack available to you to get back like Crushing Hammers, Enhanced Hammers, stuff like that, which is really horrible. And then simply tank a hit and evolve up into your Vaporeon and get out of there on a future turn. So there's all sorts of options for this guy, just because it's a colorless attack to use this Hollow Hunt GX. I think it doesn't go into a lot of decks, but there's a few niche things where I can foresee it seeing play. I gave it a 2-star just because I think it's worth mentioning, and the fact that this is a colorless GX attack on a basic just means that every deck now has the option to have just a GX attack in there if they really need to, and it can be nice for recovering some key resources if you think that's worthwhile. So that's going to be it for the Eeveelutions today. I think they are all very promising cards. I really want to experiment with the Flareon and Vaporeon. The Jolteon is an outstanding card that we all know is going to be very strong, and I also can't wait to start testing that, and it's going to be at the top tables for certain. I mean, it's just so powerful, and Zapdos is going to be there, so Jolteon will be alongside it. Let me know what's your favorite, your favorite Eeveelution in general. Which one are you going to start experimenting with? Is there a combo I missed for any of these cards? And let me know what you think about the Eevee as well. Is it just complete fodder, or will there be other niche decks that will want to play this GX attack? I'd love to hear all down below. For now, though, it has been Joe from OmniPoke, and I'll be back to team up deck analysis tomorrow. Cheers.